And the 2024 presidential election has taken unprecedented turns, but the issues really have been around for decades. That's what Bloomberg Opinion columnist Frank Berry explores in his new book, Backroads and Better Angels. He sat down with Wall Street Week's David Westin to talk about why he traveled along the Lincoln Highway to write his new book.
In 2016, when the country seemed to be coming apart at the seams and lots of people were getting angry about Trump and Clinton and the race, I wanted a different way into the story. And while everyone else was exploring what is dividing us and what's polarizing us and trying to explain red America to blue America, I wanted to explore what holds the country together. And what better way to do it than, as I learned, there's this thing called the Lincoln Highway. And I thought, what a great way to explore what holds the country together by following the spirit of Lincoln along the Lincoln Highway.
And connecting Lincoln with Better Angels in the title here, which was in his first inaugural address, actually, at a time when the country was deeply divided, goodness knows, we were going to war with ourselves. So what did you find really pulled us together?
Well, I asked that question, in fact, to every person that we met along the way. The Lincoln Highway runs from New York to San Francisco, and I asked people all along the route, what holds us together as a country? And I heard lots of different answers, as you might imagine. People talked about the Constitution, they talked about freedom, they talked about love of country, they talked about neighbors. But of course, it does run deeper than that, and that's why Lincoln is so important to the story. And in fact, at a time when immigration is such a divisive issue, one of the things that Lincoln said holds us together is this idea that he calls the electric cord. He talked about how whether your ancestors came here on the Mayflower or you arrived here yesterday as an immigrant, it's the promise in the Declaration of Independence that he calls the electric cord that holds us together as a people. And I think that's something that's important to remember, too. We're not a nation founded on a particular nationality or religion or language. We're founded on an idea, and it's that promise of freedom and equality.
You undertook this 7-month, I think, voyage in a Winnebago,
if
I'm not mistaken, with your wife.
That's right.
When we were still in a pandemic lockdown.
Yes.
It was an interesting time for the country, actually, and in a presidential election in 2020 at the same time.
That's right.
So were there forces pulling us together at that point? Because it was really a tough time for the country.
It was an incredibly tough time. We had, as you say, the pandemic, we had the election, and we also had the wake of the George Floyd protests. So there was an awful lot going on, and one of the things that we heard from people all along the route, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, was a real frustration about how divided we were. And people had different, they blamed different sides for that, but there was also a sense of frustration about how difficult it was going to be to overcome it, but also this sense of resilience that we've been through difficult things before and that somehow, some way, America always finds a way to get past it.
You served with Mike Bloomberg, our majority owner,
yes,
founder, right, when he was mayor. And it does strike me there's a difference between the local and the national. We have a tendency in the media to focus on the national, where in fact, we're actually a country of a lot of cities and states, each of which is different from one another. Did you see a difference in the attitude toward unity with respect to cities and localities and communities versus what we see in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things I wanted to do with the book, was to step out of the 2020 election campaign, to really leave Trump and Biden behind for the most part, and to talk with people about national issues, but from a local and personal perspective. And that allowed for a much, I think, healthier and constructive dialogue, because, you know, the old Tip O'Neill line that all politics is local is a good thing. When people can talk about their local schools and their community, it keeps it away from the kind of most vitriolic aspects of partisan dialogue.
What did you learn from this extraordinary voyage with your wife that might be applicable today? We're in another presidential election now, and we have candidates, national candidates, who talk about unity, pulling us together. But often the way they run, the way they position themselves does not tend to pull us together. It tends to be more divisive. It looks like a lot of politicians have decided the way to get elected is by being divisive rather than unifying.
I think that's very true. And candidates run to the extremes because that's where the votes are often in a primary. But one of the things that we took away from the trip, from conversation after conversation, was a sense from people that there's more to the middle than the politicians in Washington are recognizing and acting on. And so one quick story. After we ended the Lincoln Highway, we traveled down on our way home on a southern route, and we went to the southern border. And I met with the deputy sheriff there, and I did a ride along of the border in southeastern Arizona, and we saw the wall being built. And the sheriff had said to me, you know, we know that the wall is not the answer to everything here. It's not the end all and be all. We need a balanced security plan. We need more staffing. We need more cameras. We need more technology. And he said, we also need to make it easier for people to come here. He said, we need a balanced, progressive immigration reform plan. And he blamed both parties for not delivering it. And that's from a sheriff on the border. And I think if you spoke with most people in the country, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they would say, yes, we do need all of those things. We got to be able to secure the border, but we need to make it easier for people to come here, and that requires immigration reform. And that's something we've been arguing about for 20 years without Washington really acting on it.